Welcome to The Third Story. I'm Leo Sidran. I probably don't have to tell you how large Prince loomed in the 1980s and 1990s. Looking back on it now, it's hard to believe he was even on the planet and that he was real. History happens in the rear view, but of course, every historical icon was once a person who woke up every day and put their pants on, one leg at a time. Sure, in Prince's case, they might have been purple velvet bell-bottoms with cutouts around the butt, but he still had to put them on. And Prince was also a curious case in how international he was, an undeniable star the world over, but how local he was at the same time. He came from Minneapolis, and then Minneapolis came to him. I don't think there was a way to exist in Minneapolis without dealing with Prince on some level, and that was certainly true if you were a musician. Through Purple Rain, his music, and his videos, Prince showed Minneapolis to the world. He shined a light on that fertile creative community, which just so happened to be home to an absolutely astounding concentration of local, talented musicians. In that sense, I think Prince got a little lucky because even though he was generally self-contained for much of his work, he could lock himself alone in the studio and emerge 12 hours later with a fully formed hit. He also relied on the deep bench of talent in the Twin Cities to round out the experience. And that's how, along the way, I think Prince also showed the world to Minneapolis. He showed them their potential. I'm not the first person to say this, of course, and in fact, this isn't even the first time I brought it up here on this podcast. Over the years, I've returned to Minneapolis physically and figuratively in these conversations to explore that legacy. Conversations with Paul and Ricky Peterson, Mandy Moore, John Fields, Cory Wong, Dessa, Dave King, and others have helped me to consider the case of Prince and how he transformed Minneapolis from a very hip but somewhat well-kept secret in the upper Midwest to an engine of world-class music. Once Prince was done with it, Minnesota had migrated from being just a state in the Union to a state of mind. I imagine it was almost impossible for a young, talented Minneapolis musician to come of age in the 80s or 90s, especially if they were black, and not have to confront the question of Prince one way or the other. If you could play, he was going to find you. He kept his musicians on call, sometimes bringing them into the studio in the middle of the night to record on a new song, as if the track was a breech baby in need of emergency medical attention. And that's pretty much what happened to Michael Bland. Frankly, there's a part of me even today that can't believe Michael Bland is real, or that I talked to him for this episode. Because when I was a young man, not even a man really, just teetering on the edge of it, I would listen to my Prince CDs searching for clues, studying their construction, the way one might study architecture or biology, like dissecting a frog or something. As I listened, I tried to parse every individual element and discover some universal truth. Prince records were like a kind of Bible for me, which is complicated in and of itself when you think about it, considering just how sinful they could be. And wouldn't you know it, Michael Bland was the drummer on those records for most of the 90s during Prince's New Power Generation period. In his way, Michael Bland also manages to exist in multiple spaces at once. As an internationally iconic drummer, recognizable both for his outsized way of playing and his actual physical presence, he is not easy to overlook in any sense. He's one of the greatest. After his tenure with Prince, he went on to work with some of the biggest pop stars in the world, recorded with blues and jazz legends, and has been the drummer in another legendary Minneapolis band, Soul Asylum, for nearly 20 years. But he's also a local fixture in the Twin Cities. For years, he played every Monday night with Dr. Mambo's Combo, which is basically the baddest soul and R&B cover band you never heard, unless you took yourself down to the Bunker Club in Minneapolis on a Monday night and paid the cover. Over the years, that weekly residency became an incubator for generations of young players looking to make a mark in town, and Michael became the gatekeeper. I'd heard stories, some of them sounded apocryphal, about his photographic memory for tempo and key and arrangement. And when we spoke recently, he opened the conversation by recalling something specific that happened 30 years ago, and it blew my mind. How would I know that he remembered it correctly? Because it was the only other time we had met, and I was the only other person who could verify it. For most of my childhood, my dad worked a lot in Minneapolis, at Minneapolis recording studios with Minneapolis musicians. We lived in Wisconsin, and Minnie was one of the closest meccas, less than 5 hours away in a car. So I spent much of my young life going up to the Twin Cities to hang out with those characters. And when Prince opened the now storied facility, Paisley Park in Chanhassen, Minnesota, my dad worked there all the time. He produced albums for Phil Upchurch and Ricky Peterson. He did the soundtrack to the documentary film Hoop Dreams, and made a handful of other records there too. So sometimes I would tag along with him and just kind of lurk in the shadows of Paisley. Often my dad worked with the musicians in Prince's band, like the Hornheads, his horn section who have been seen regularly lately with Cory Wong, or the Steels, a family of incredible singers, and of course, Michael Bland. And Prince was around too. You'd see him sometimes moving through the space, or you'd see evidence that he had been there the night before. Sometimes I could poke my head into the control room of Studio A, where he would generally work, and see the setup from his most recent session, one of those epic and isolated overnight recordings. Last week, I talked to trumpeter Phil Lassiter, who told me the story of working with Prince years later during his final tours. Phil described a lightness in Prince that I think may have been somewhat absent during this period in the 90s. In any case, today's conversation is a beautiful complement to that one. Sometimes when I talk to those who were in Prince's gravitational orbit, even just for a little while, I get the sense that they have been branded by him and that they're left to deal with the aftermath for the rest of their lives. In the case of Paul Peterson, he was literally rebranded with the stage name St. Paul. In other cases, like with Michael Bland, it's more that he was kind of stamped with the purple P, and even though he's had an impressively rich and varied career, he is on some level always dealing with the debris of those years with Prince. I've wanted to talk to Michael Bland for a long, long time about his experience, about his playing, about his approach, and this conversation was so beautiful. We talked about his early development, playing in church, and how he handled being thrust onto the world stage at a young age, the good and the bad, and how it opened up questions for him about what he calls the guilt by association of working with someone whose behavior differs from your own. We also talked about some of his favorite records and projects over the years, his work with some of my previous guests like John Fields, Paul and Ricky Peterson, Cory Wong, and Vulfpeck. And we talked quite a bit about how he has processed many of the events of the last year, the death of George Floyd, the Black Lives Matter movement, and racial politics in general through the lens of being a black man in Minneapolis. Third-story.com is your place to go. Sign up, subscribe, get involved, check the archive, all the previous episodes I've mentioned already, plus literally hundreds more. And when you're ready to get involved in a deeper level, it's patreon.com/thirdstorypodcast. You know what to do. As I often do, I've curated a Spotify playlist and some videos of Michael that are pertinent to our conversation today. Without further ado, here's me and Michael Bland talking it down. Michael Bland.
Man, you look like your dad. you do look like your daddy, boy. What did you... I haven't seen you, man, since you were probably 15.
Boy, you're absolutely right about that. I can't believe you know that, but that's probably right. 14, 15 years old, tagging, hiding behind the console at Paisley. Man.
I got this weird sort of thing where I can do that. Sometimes I just can sort of stretch time to the right sort of space and whatnot. Because I was like, I just had to think about, actually I was thinking about your height in relation to the piano. Because at some point during one of those sessions, you came out, by your dad, and you guys were talking about something, maybe singing something. Yeah, so that's what I remembered when I was like, where did I see you? It was never in the control room, but it was a couple of times out there.
Sneaking around. Well, it is really interesting that you say that because, I know that you say you have a memory like that where you can stretch time, but, I talked to Cory Wong a few years ago, and he was telling me about coming up and going down, playing with Dr. Mambo's combo at bunkers and stuff. And he said, and I know he's not the only one who talks about the absolute precision of your memory when it comes to time. I guess not only when it comes to playing, but also maybe, just your life.
Yeah, I got a weird relationship with time in general. It's weird, man. I remember a lot of details, and I don't know what that leaves room for, in my old age, because I'm worried. It's like, am I going to just not have room for anything else? I just got seasons of I Love Lucy packed away here. And then I got, Mahavishnu Orchestra records here. And I got,
Right. So maybe you're just full. Now, whatever happens from now on, it's going to go in one ear and out the other.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's a great cop-out because I meet a lot of people that expect me to remember their names. And it's just like, hey, listen, I'm 52. I got a lot stuck in my head, man. I have a lot of useless information and I have some crucial information. And a lot of the time, I can't tell which is which.
Yeah, well, maybe there's no difference in the end, In
the end, yeah, it really don't matter, does it?
But okay, so tell me, what do you remember? What I can tell is that By the time you came out of high school, you were like a fully formed, absolutely ferocious cat, and were playing on the highest level possible pretty shortly after that. But I want to know what happened before that. I want to know what got you to be that guy.
See, you say all that, but I auditioned for like Jazz Band 1 at the University of Minnesota, and they didn't let me in.
What do you remember about the audition?
Well, for some reason, it's probably had just been gigging too much or not moisturizing. You know that the Midwest, the climate can be murder on you. Like you have to like either moisturize properly or you know what I mean. Like, and I probably was a little less concerned about those things, and so I think I had been playing, and a place in my hand started to split open a little bit. And like right around in here somewhere, I seem to remember. And it was making it hard to hold the sticks right. And it was painful. And I was like, do I have to go to the doctor about this? And now that I'm thinking back, maybe I hadn't really like studied the music they gave me hard enough. I was working a lot when I was, once I started with the combo when I was 17, it just led to more work. I only had one night a week off at some point. And
in high school.
Yeah, and that was like Thursdays. Bobby Vandell had gone on tour with Alexander O'Neill, and he eventually moved to LA for a while. And when he did, he kind of left me, with whatever Lamont Cranston band gigs there were. And I think maybe Paul Metza was in there. Doug Maynard was in there. Like he was the, one of the busiest drummers in town. And I was this, 16 going on 17-year-old kid, getting prepped to get in there and start swinging for Bobby,
Where did you first start playing? Were you playing in church?
Yeah, man, you know how it is, man. No, maybe you don't. But, if you're a young black musician, that's usually your first trial by fire. Get in there. And, it's like if you don't have the instincts to listen and to pay attention to what the singer or the choir director are doing, or what the piano player's trying to say, hey, you got to watch a lot in church. It's good training, for any musician, really, because a lot of time the singer will be tapping it. I like to sing a song this morning, amen. It's called Jesus is Real, and they'll start tapping their foot before, so you get a sense of where the tempo is going to be, and then they start singing, and then the organist or the pianist, run them down, and it's got to come together right then and there.
Yeah. And did you take to it? Were you an automatic? Was it just a natural fit for you?
Yeah. It was, Leo. That's the reality of the situation. Music has been in and around my life as long as I can remember. My sister said they were trying to teach me how to read, and they were succeeding. But a little before that, they had all the Motown 45s that were on. It was the dark blue label with the star in Detroit.
The
Silver Star. And they had Jackson 5. They had Stevie Wonder. They had all these 45s, and they'd try to test me and go like, well, which one do you want to listen to? And it'd be like, ABC by the Jackson 5. I think I Want You Back was on the A side. Or you want to listen to this, it's Stevie Wonder, Superstition. And it'd be like I'd point. I couldn't really,
Wow, you could there's no wrong answers, fortunately, when those are the choices.
Right, but I think I always point. The thing was, they try to mess me up and, switch them up. And I think it was always Superstition. No, that one. That's it. So, I don't know. I guess also growing up with all the, the greatest music the world has known, made me very opinionated and about my own taste and what I was going to, take in. Independently.
So you're 16, 17 years old. Bobby Vandell is on the road. He kind of delivers you his gigs on his way out.
In a way. Let's just put it in those terms. I mean, really, I was sort of up and coming, and had it not been for Bobby, who I met at the Twin Cities Best Drummer Contest in 1986, he was a judge. And so it was me and, a bunch of other cats that I had never heard of or met before. And I just wanted to, it was a good excuse to get to play a brand new set of sonars win or lose, it was like, oh wow, yeah, you get to, and lo and behold, I walked away with the kit.
Yeah, good for you. Yeah.
And then Bobby comes up and starts saying, "Well, hey, you should come down to Archie's bunker, man. You should sit in with the combo, or better yet, come on down to the Whiskey Junction. I'm down there with Doug Maynard every Sunday, and I'm 16, man. I can't get into a bar, sir." He's like, "Oh, Big Ray Parsons will protect you, man. Just stand behind him." So I'd be down there behind Big Ray, and the bikers would break out in a fight, and Big Ray would just clunk them together like Mo and throw them out. Get out of here.
And you're a kid, and you're just a kid, but I mean, it sounds like the scene kind of opened to you at that time.
It did. Everywhere I went, I got nothing but support and constructive criticism, and yeah. I mean, Bobby, most of all. I mean, he had, in a way, it's like he had to move over a little bit to make space for the noise that I was making in town. And, I could see how he might feel some kind of way about that. But, he's never said a cross word to me. He certainly has a right, I mean, he was probably the busiest dude in town. And I just sort of, I mean, it's happened to all of us. I lived long enough to have, other cats come behind me. And, that's just the cycle.
Like I say, I talked to Cory, and I've talked to some kids that come around the combo now and then and have interactions with you. And the reputation that you have with these younger generation guys is as kind of the godfather of that scene, of kind of making sure that the level is kept high enough. Did you start to, over time, and we're talking about a lot of years now, take on that mantle of making sure that, certain expectations are met?
Yeah, I personally nominated myself to become the standard bearer, and it's like a lot of cats, they want to come in and they want to sit in and they want to have their chance to play with some of the best musicians around, and I'd let them. And sometimes they'd be up to the challenge and sometimes they would not. And I don't think that you're doing a disservice if you're not honest about what you think they're doing.
Yeah.
I've worked with a lot of great musicians in the world, and I was just actually saying this to somebody on Facebook the other day, who I posted something about, if you can't play rhythm guitar, then you shouldn't be, playing guitar at all, really. And
yes.
Somebody disagreed and was like, "Well, do you play guitar, Mr. Bland?" And I was like, "I'll tell you what, if you put a guitar in my hand, what you hear will be in time.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you that." And not only that, as a drummer, you're at the center of all things. You're where everything intersects.
Yeah.
You're listening. You're trying to make sure everybody's playing along with you. And a lot of the time, the drummer knows all the parts.
Yes.
And the drummers never get any credit for knowing anything about music. And I think in a way, I don't know if it was a machination of my ego or my just like, I'm going to show the world that a drummer is more than just somebody who hits a thing with sticks.
Yeah.
It's like, and when I speak, I'm going to know what I'm talking about. And then you're not going to tell me how important rhythm guitar is.
Yeah.
After I've played with Prince.
Yeah.
After I recorded with Phil Upchurch,
mm-hmm.
George Benson.
Mm-hmm.
I know people like Sonny Thompson.
Yeah.
I like Miko Weaver, Levi Caesar. I know how all the parts are supposed to work. There's a schematic in my brain. And it picks up deficits.
Picking up deficits, I mean, that's the thing. What are you honing in on when you hear one of these kids come up and play? What are you responding to?
Well, I guess first off, as a drummer, the timing is most important. I'm listening to see, can you play in time?
Yeah.
Are you speeding up when you take fills?
Yeah.
Are you dragging when you go to the ride cymbal?
Yeah.
Like, drummers have weird tendencies. I had them too. I had to just beat them out of myself.
Yeah.
In time to meet Prince when he came to Bunkers.
So let's talk about, I can't imagine that anybody, especially at that time in history, could come up in Minneapolis and not be really, really super aware of Prince. He must have just loomed so large.
Yes, but also, I grew up in I don't want to say a religious household, but it's weird. I guess we're going all around the horn, aren't we, Leo? Most people who know me know I believe in God. Jesus Christ is my savior, and listening to Prince's music didn't always rub me the right way, like he had some, you talking about, you've probably seen the same things I've seen.
Sure.
A lot of things Prince wrote songs about, or, you know, he had a kind of strangely explicit videos early in his career. Like any of the stuff he shot, like the video for Dirty Mind, or the video for Controversy, and like Sexuality. It looks like they shot him like in like some kind of a church. There's like stained glass up in back of him, and it's like what I saw was really like, I'm like, oh, this dude is, you know, I don't know what he's doing, but it's just gave me kind of, you know, I don't want to say a bad feeling, but it was like it really challenged my sensibilities.
Yeah.
As a positive Christian person.
I hear that. And then you end up playing on songs like Sexy MF and these tracks.
We're all alone in the villa on the Riviera. Got some friends on the south side in case you cared. Out of all of your friends, I want to be the closest. That's why I tell you things so you'll be the mostest. When it comes to life, to be this man's wife, you got to be well educated on the subject of fights. I mean the prevention of, in other words, it's REM, meaning of this thing called love. Are you up on this? If so, then you can get up off a hug and a kiss. Come in, baby. You sexy mother.
Well, yeah, I mean, once you get in over your head, it doesn't matter how much deeper you go. It's, you know, you're doing that dance, Leo, and there's nothing you can do about it.
But I want you to finish that story about how, so you were not entirely sure how you felt about the message that was coming off of Prince when you were growing up.
Yeah, I didn't know whether he was an agent of destruction or just a person, you know, blurring the lines for, you know, like lack of a better word, controversy.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, Prince was a button pusher. Everybody knows that. I've spoken to enough people who were there early on to understand that that was his intention. It was not really even necessarily like, is this truth, or, you know, is this fact or fiction? It was more just like, I'm capturing your imagination. That's what I'm doing. So it didn't really matter what you thought. And he never gave anybody enough to really, you know, like everybody had to wonder. They wondered whether he was gay or straight. And, you know, it's like, okay, he's wearing some clothes. Are those bikini briefs? Oh, those are leg warmers. Wait a minute. What is going on here?
I hear you saying there is no conclusion to be made. It's not like there was some real deep philosophy behind it. He was just operating in the moment all the time. But I mean, did you ever come to any conclusion yourself about whether he was an agent of destruction, or whether or not, because it's also a gift from God, if you believe in God, that he was given this incredible gift? You know, how do you square those two things?
Well, I don't know that you do. I mean, I guess the first thing you have to reckon with is the fact that it's not up to you to judge either way. The second off, I guess you have to consider yourself in relation to, or you know, or your association with. And I'm aware that being associated with Prince put me in a certain context with many people I met after I joined.
Yeah.
And you know, I remember going to a watch meeting with my dad. He was playing at some church in St. Paul, and I walked in there, and I think maybe Get Off had been in heavy rotation on MTV.
Right.
And I sat down kind of near the organ, but that's also where like all the old saints sit, all the old women of the church. And one of them turned around and said, "Excuse me, young man, didn't I see you on the TV with Prince?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she kind of looked at me for a minute, and then she went back to what she was doing. A lot of things ran through my mind. First off, it was like, okay, are you judging me for where I've been at? And, you know, and number two, if you did see me, you were probably looking a little too long at something you probably weren't supposed to be. So that's kind of the posture I had to presume.
Yeah.
For most of my time there. Just that sometimes people put you in a position where you had to defend your right to explore whatever musical boundaries you might want. But also, it's like, just because you get this impression of Prince doesn't mean that we're that similar. You know, it's like, I could work in Honeywell and build detonators all day. Does that make me a murderer? So it's a weird sort of thing to have to measure and live with. But I also realized that, it was my own free will at work. I could have said no and went, done the more difficult thing and moved to Los Angeles and tried to, elbow my way into that scene and just, make it another way. And as a matter of fact, after my first tour with Prince, I considered that. I thought, well, okay, I can see how this is going to go. This is a temperamental person who's extremely talented. It's a challenging job. I've proven already that I can hang. Like, maybe I'm ready for something else. And I had happened to hear that Stevie Wonder was starting to put together a new band. And I think he was going to start auditioning people in the fall sometime. And it's funny because I ran into Bobby Z at a club called The Fine Line.
Sure.
And he asked me, well, how's the gig going? And I said, yeah, it's all right, man. But I think I'm kind of over it now. And he's like, well, how do you mean? I said, well, I can see that this dude is temperamental. He's imaginative. He's peerless, as a person doing what he's doing.
Yeah. But
I don't know if I prefer this kind of treatment because, I guess I found working with him more or less to be, while we had to be connected musically, personally, he was somewhat detached. And that was at a time when I thought that having some kind of warm friendship with the people you're working with was an important thing. These days, I'll say this: people who hate me still work with me. 'Cause I don't really hate anybody, but I've given people a lot of reasons to have some consternation and feelings about myself. So I'm saying I don't look at it as much as a barrier. It's a small town. You got to get stuff done. Whatever beef I got between me and somebody else can be squashed in a matter of seconds.
Yeah.
Because I'm not here to hold on to that. And that's what I learned in working with the Prince. And not that I didn't like him, but he wasn't always the same cat every day. And I think that he had to maintain a certain, posture himself. Like, he's a band leader. This is his situation. And he alone is going to be judged by the results. So I understand even more so the older I get. Like, that was the way he felt he had to run his situation. He had a perfect right to, and I could have left at any time, but I didn't.
I absolutely hear what you're saying. And again, though, you were very young, and, you're talking about walking into a situation where your leader is a very unusual kind of cat already, just off the bat, as many artists are, temperamental, but we're talking about on a level that is really a once-in-a-lifetime kind of person, if that, if that. And
well, yeah, I wouldn't disagree.
And you are a kid in many ways. How do you even hold on to who you are when the guy walking through the door could be different from day to day?
And that's the remarkable part, I guess. And also the reason why I stay true to myself to this day. I say things a lot of people don't want to hear because the truth must be told. And I know I have the strength of character to follow through. To not tell the truth is a disservice in any situation you're in. But it takes courage, and there can be a price for telling the truth. And I guess I've always been willing to face that.
Yeah.
And in the time that I worked for Prince, there was only a couple of situations that got, to a point of like yelling, maybe, and one was like, I needed to go to Chicago for a funeral. My ex-wife, her aunt had died from like spinal meningitis. And it was like, I was a member of that family. I was expected to go, and I ultimately went, but I had to ask for Prince's permission to go first. I had to ask, well, not for Prince's permission to get married, but I had to find a time in the schedule of the year where I might be able to do it.
Because the nature of that gig it was like a full-time job, right? Like, you were working for Prince at all times. Is that a fair way of?
Yeah. I mean, God, I look back now, it's like, how did I go 7 years straight? No sick days. Like, you couldn't, it was like, you just can't. I would have been rolled in a cast, in a body cast. The drum set would have been set up. Well, I was in a car accident last night, Prince, but I'll do my best.
And it was middle of the night phone calls. It was at all hours.
Oh yeah, anytime, like the fire department. Prince would have a fire, and I'd have to go out there and put it
out.
There and stomp it out with my size 16 feet.
Well, it's amazing that even those records that you made early on, the Phil Upchurch records and the Ricky records, and when my dad was hanging out at Paisley too, it's amazing that they even figured out how to squeeze those sessions in around, because that was right at that time.
Yeah, I'm not sure how any of that ever happened. I mean, I did a session at Paisley with Paul Westerberg. Like, it just kind of happened. I walked in Studio B when Fred Eltringham went to the bathroom because I think Paul had told him, just sit in front of this door and make sure nobody comes in. And I walked by and I said, "What are you doing out here?" He said, "Oh, I'm supposed to not let anybody in. Paul Westerberg's working there." Paul Westerberg's in there. All right. And I happened to come back, waddling past the door, and Fred was gone. Oh, okay, here's my chance. So I just walked right in, and he was in there with his producer, and we just started talking. I mean, we started talking about like fashion and clothes and like, not even really about music.
Yeah.
Like right away, we just kind of got in each other's heads. And he was like, "Hey, I got a couple of songs that there's like a drum machine holding a place for an actual drummer on a couple of these. Like, would you want to, maybe play on these two songs?" I said, "Yeah, man." And I think we're supposed to get a break in a couple of hours, like a proper break. So Magoo, James McGregor, master of time, space, and dimension, he grabs like a kick drum, a floor tom, and a snare, and a hi-hats, and like maybe I think like a big crash cymbal, and from like the tech room, and pulls him into Studio B, and I did it in a couple of takes, and we were, and then I did the other song like the next day or the day after. But I mean that, just I got in there, I got out. A lot of it because I worked there. It was easier to sort of manipulate these sorts of things. That was just kind of a happy accident.
But if you hadn't been working out there, I mean, was there an expectation that any gig that you would have taken that wasn't for Prince at that time, there was always the caveat that if Prince calls, I'll have to sub this out or I won't be able to make this? I mean, was that just everybody knew that?
Kind of, sort of, which made it, you'd have to pick times when you knew he was out of town. He went to Los Angeles quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So, some of it was that. And sometimes he'd go to France. He had a place in Paris. So, whenever he was out or we knew he was going to be out, that was when you'd have to kind of, load things up and try to get stuff done.
So, okay, I hear about all the complexities of the gig. What did you learn from him, though? Or what did you take from it that was positive?
Oh, I mean, a staggering amount. He taught me to trust myself. He taught me to produce myself.
Mm-hmm.
He taught me how to listen. I may have been imbued with some of these qualities already, but he strengthened them definitely. But working with people who are, between 10 and 15 years your senior, who've already been there for a hot minute, you don't want to make too many mistakes when they're around. So it was an inhibition that I placed upon myself because I didn't want my slip showing. But when we'd start working on a piece of music and Prince would say, "I'm thinking of a beat kind of like this, just, try something like this." And I'd kind of freeze and my mind would start racing like, well, what am I going to play? And I'm expected to work these things out while everybody's sitting here watching, And Prince would say, "Just put your hands down and try something, man." He says, "You're not going to get anywhere if you just sit there and ponder." It's like, you got to get into it. You got to find the city and then you can find the street, but you have to start moving,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's a whole other aspect is recording, and like becoming a recording drummer is a very specific kind of drummer. There's a lot of great drummers in the world, but only a handful of them are the ones that get called to play on records.
Right. And because he did a healthy amount of both, I really figured out how to even my approach out. It was almost one and the same. I treated every gig like I was playing in the studio,
And what is that? That's like an element of editing and conception in terms of what you're going to play. How do you think about that?
Wow. I guess I don't think about it. The music speaks. If you're aware, the music is telling you what's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
And I think I've spent my whole life trying to get in that space because really, like when it's easiest, you're not thinking. You're just responding. You're just being responsible.
Yeah.
You're responding to what's happening.
Yeah.
Unless you're the initiator, and then, you have to, as a drummer, you have to wear all hats because even if somebody else is running the band, even if there's another MD in the band, they need to cooperate with you to get the rest of the band to obey.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's the thing. That's the drummer makes the band in so many ways. That's the whole thing.
You're a necessary bully to a certain degree. And when the singer needs it, when I played with Chaka Khan, she'd be looking for me to break the band down on those verses. Blah! You got to make sure people are making room for the action, for the reason why people paid to get in there, not to see you, not to hear you. They came to hear Chaka. If the band's trying to run roughshod over Shaka's back, well, first off, she'll cuss you out before I get a chance.
I had a conversation with John Fields about working with you at one point, and he said something really beautiful about you. But one of the things that he said was, Michael is the drummer that you can call if you know exactly what you want and he'll nail it, or if you have no idea what you want and he'll help you figure out what you wanted. Either way, you can call Michael for that.
Wow. Well, God bless him for saying that, man. I love John Fields a lot. I've called him the patron saint of the Minneapolis music scene because he's created more opportunity in this town just for people who are talented and don't know how to get moving. How to get started. And some people who are on the cusp of doing something great, they just need somebody like him who has the focus and the musicality, to help them refine their vision. And then they're off and running. To some degree, it's got to be thankless, a thankless position to hold. They advance forward, and I'm sure, there's a lot of decisions labels make about who they want producing these artists' debut records and so on and so forth. He's generous for the fact that he's probably been stuck holding the bag many a time.
Well, he's interesting too because, and I think this is where it applies to you, and my dog apparently agrees. I don't know if you can hear her barking in the background.
I heard an arf.
Yeah. That he both develops and helps to fertilize the scene in Minneapolis, but also when he was in LA, he was interested in bringing friends that he had from back in Minneapolis to LA. And I remember turning on the TV 10 years ago, maybe a little more, and there was Nick Jonas with Prince's rhythm section behind him. And I thought, well, what is going on here? This is crazy. Because I didn't know who John was. I just remember seeing you playing with Nick Jonas and thinking, somebody here made an unbelievable call.
It wasn't that hard a call.
Yeah.
It's like he didn't have to sell Nick.
Yeah.
But I had already played on one of those Jonas Brothers records. Because John would bring me out.
Yeah.
He used Dorian Crozier quite a bit. Yep. He used Dorian more than me because Dorian lived there.
Yep.
And he's a great drummer. And also he had a working relationship with him from when they grew up in Boston.
Yeah.
Or when they knew each other in Boston. Yeah. So I had already met the Jonas Brothers and I played on a couple songs. One was I think it was a single called Paranoid. And another song was kind of a bluesy number called, I think it was called Hey Baby. Hey Baby! And we were talking after we cut it, and John said something about, man, it'd be cool if we got Johnny Lang to play on this. And Nick turned to me and said, you know Johnny Lang? I was like, yeah, man, me and Johnny, we go way back, bro. His dad used to bring him down to Bunkers when he was 12. He cut his teeth with us. I played on the Grammy-winning record that he put out. I know him. Why? It'd be great if we could get him on the, I'll call him and see how he feels about it. Yeah, that was my chance to play I got you there, young man. And so I called Johnny and he said, well, I'd like to hear the track first. And so John Fields sent him a rough mix right away and set up a place where he could do it. And then we just waited for him to confirm, and he called back. I think that night. Yeah, I like that. They can. I like that. I like their voice, man.
Yeah.
Those kids can really sing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. Sure.
Hey, baby, why you treating me bad? Hey, darling, no, you making me mad. I'm going crazy, trying to figure out why you were leaving. Give me a reason. Say that you need me, I know you're deceiving.
maybe some people, I mean, I know you say it wasn't that hard a call to make. It's not like you had to be sold. I'm not saying that. I'm saying more that I wonder if there's a lot of people that would almost think that if you don't know Minneapolis, if you don't have access to Minneapolis, if you don't have a John Fields or somebody who has all the inside knowledge of who to call and who the cats are and has those like long-term relationships with, I wonder if you still kind of are a mystery, that the Minneapolis scene is still kind of like, who are these cats? How do we get them? You know what I'm saying? I don't know if you've ever felt that.
I've felt exclusivity, but I've also felt isolation.
Mm-hmm.
When I first started trying to figure out where I was headed after Prince let the band go in '96, I was like, okay, I guess I'll go to LA and kick it around out there and see what I can get into. And a lot of people didn't want to hire me because they thought it would be too much money. Imagine that. I'm going broke, trying to get a job in LA, and nobody wants to hire me because they don't think they have enough money to pay me. I think I got passed up for a tour with Macy Gray for that exact reason. I was like, well, what? Nobody called back. It was Barry Squire, who's famous for holding auditions for artists who are getting ready to do stuff in Los Angeles. I went, Barry said, come down to this Macy Gray audition. I think she might really dig you. And I'm moving the drums around, getting ready, to start up. And she comes right up on the kit. Hey, I used to play. I see you on TV with Prince. You used to be Prince's drummer, ain't you? I had to say yes. I didn't know if that meant it was a good thing or a bad thing. So the audition happened, and then I heard nothing for about 4 days. And then I finally called Barry. I'm like, Barry, what's up?
Yeah.
Did I suck? Did I not do what I was supposed to do? Oh yeah, she thought you were the best drummer she ever heard. She just didn't think you'd go out for $1,500 a week. I said, right now I'm making zero.
Well,
but they went ahead and chose some young cat who I guess they felt, I can't be mad about that. Yeah, give a young cat a shot. Let him earn. Why not?
But that's interesting, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. How I think being associated with such a big star early on, people would make certain assumptions about what you will and won't do. And that's why I also think it's interesting that one thing that did happen for you early on is you started going to Europe and working with European artists that, whether it was Georgia T or, there were people that you figured out that you would go over there and that you would, like to work in that environment.
Yeah, I was Georgia's musical director for 5 years.
Yeah.
And that was just like a thing I fell into because Ricky Minor and Michael Baker were her rhythm section prior to then. But they were doing double duty with Whitney at that time. So it was becoming, I think, maybe inconvenient for them to have to wait till Michael and Ricky were available. And Sonny and I, they said they wanted a bass player and a drummer who had worked together, that they had a thing together. And darn it, me and Sonny have a thing together. So they called and, okay, we'll go. So right away, it was just, everything was cool. Sonny sat back some of the time in rehearsal and let Ricky Minor do his thing because he was, had been the MD and he was there to condition us to take things from there. And I think James Raymond, who is David Crosby's, he found out David Crosby was his father, like when he was like 20 or something.
Oh.
And
wow.
James Raymond, great keyboard player. I'm not sure what he's doing now, but I'm sure he's prospering because he's just has undeniable talent. So he was going to take over as MD after Ricky flew back to the States. Yeah, we found a real chemistry, and Georgia ended up asking us to come back and continue to work with her from there. And we recorded with her in the studio, and we toured with her, played a lot of Dominica Inn shows on television on like Rai Due.
Yeah.
To the point where, like, man, we kept running into what's his name, Tom Jones. We'd get in the commissary of the studio, and Tom Jones would be looking like he had been up drinking all night, but fresh, like ready for it. Good afternoon, gentlemen. I got Tom Jones, man. That's Tom Jones.
So that sounds like a very different kind of scene than what you had been in with the Prince world. I mean, it sounds like in many ways more free vibe.
Well, sort of, but the thing that's not the unfree part is that all artists have a sense of what's the polite way to put it, Leo? They have a sense of proprietorship.
Yes.
It's like they want you to be cool, but not that cool. Like they don't want you to be looking for your next gig while you're on the gig you're on. So,
Yes.
and we were very social and we're likable,
Yeah.
gentlemen.
Yeah.
So we were always getting into trouble we weren't supposed to. We were doing
I see.
recording sessions for other people while we were in France, like just, oh, well, we have a night off here, maybe we can work it out. As a freelance musician, as you probably know, you got to kind of take whatever work you can get your hands on. If you don't make a big deal about it, you can get away with a few things and supplement your income. And actually sometimes it has to do with the generosity of the artist.
Yeah.
Because we managed to do a 5-day tour of France as a trio. Sonny, Jeff Lee Johnson, the great guitar player from Philadelphia, and me. Georgia had like a week and a half off. And we had to ask her and her management, is it okay if we take this week and a half and go to France to do this quick tour and come back? We were all in her rhythm section at the time. So we took the Euro train to France, got off. The first couple of dates, Jean Richard, I don't know if you know about Jean Richard. Jean Richard was, he's still with us, but he was in Minneapolis making a lot of jazz records.
Yeah, I know who he is. Yep.
Starting with this French woodwind player named Michel Portal. And he was most famous for touring the world playing the Mozart concertos. That's what he did. That was his legit gig, but he had made jazz records here and there in France. And so Jean, who has a wife and child here in Minnesota, was decided, like one of the times when he was here, to get Michelle to come over and work with me and Sonny. And he brought Tony Hymas from like the Jeff Beck group, and who's bad. Tony Hymas is so bad, man. So it was Tony and Michelle, Sonny and I, for the first couple of days. And then it got so heavy musically in the first couple of days that by the time Vernon Reed came to join the session, he spent a great deal of time just kind of looking like,
yeah,
what are you guys doing? Because it was it was so non-verbally communicated what was happening. Because when you put people with endless potential in a room together like that, and I'm not saying that to speak high of myself, I can accompany anyone, and that's the whole idea. We were working to develop this picture, this platform, for Michelle. And it was very, I don't know how to put it, expressionistic. There really were no rules. At some point during the first day, I got frustrated and I said, I can't gain any objectivity on the situation.
Yeah.
And Jean heard me through the 12 mics on the drum set and came out to the studio and to me, and said, this is a subjective study. You don't need to have any objectivity over the situation. I said, okay. I'm like, okay, all right, fine. And that emboldened me to sort of step out into this territory that I would never have been motivated to go. But it just made things even weirder after that. I mean, and let me explain. Tony Hymas, God bless his soul, he spent 6 months writing compositions to try on this session. He came with a stack that high of just charts. And for the first hour, Sonny and I sat in our positions, and Tony would say, right, I've got this one here. It goes like this. And it's a bit of a, razzmatazz on this. And then he started playing. And Michelle, he speaks okay English, but he doesn't speak a lot. Tony would play something and he'd go, no, I don't like. Well, what's wrong with it? It's too classic. I don't like. It's an hour of this. No, I don't like. And Sonny happens to turn his bass on for a minute and plays something, and Michelle turns around and says, "That's it.
I like.
That's it. We play this. Sonny, we play that. That's what you just played." And Sonny said, "Huh?" I was just loosening up my hands. I don't know what I played, man. That's it. We play that, Sonny. Okay. Then that's how the rest of the session went. It was just the book, whatever book it was, got thrown out the door, and it was just this crazy ride for about 4 days. one of my favorite things that happened out of making that record, it's just called Minneapolis by Michel Portal. They had done something else in town with Eric Gravatt at the time. Later, when the record came out, it came out at the same time as Gravatt's, the thing that Gravatt had worked on with John. And Gravatt called me. First of all, we pick up the phone and Eric Gravatt's on the other end of the phone. If you know who he is, and what he does, that's an intimidating call to take. I've had a few in my lifetime. This one was I had a, what's the word called? Like referential fear of Eric Gravatt, which started as when Floyd Thompson was teaching me how to play drums. He was saying, if you ever get a chance to study with Eric Gravatt, just do that. Just discontinue what we're doing here and go do that.
Really?
The first time I met Eric, it was at the Fine Line. He was playing with his group Kaminari, and Ron Evanyuk was playing up, and they were in there, and all those yuppies at the Fine Line were just kind of loud talking over their set. And they finished up, and I mean, Eric was brilliant. He's still incredible. I mean, this was probably in 1986 or 87. And I get the courage up to go, try to talk to him. Well, he's ripping his gear down. They had dragged all the gear off the stage, and he was down like in front of where the kind of not obstructing where the kitchen doors are at the Fine Line, but closer to the wall. And I was just like, Mr. Gravatt, sir, I turned into the pimply teen on The Simpsons. Like, sir, my drum teacher said that if I could ever get lessons with you, sir, that I should. And he stopped, tearing down long enough to look back. And he said, I seen you play. You don't need no lessons. And he went back to tearing his gear down and said, where did you see me play? I saw you up the block over at the hair police was having a block party just down the street from Fine Line. I saw you, man. I heard you. You don't need no lessons. And I didn't really know how to take that. Like, there was no hope for me. You maybe just get out of the business now and save yourself. Or, or I had something of value.
Yeah, I mean, I know everybody carries their own little insecurities and stuff, but when Eric Gravatt says to you, I got nothing to show you, there's got to be a part of you that, I mean, you can carry that with you for the rest of your career, that's what he said to you.
Well, that wasn't the part that was the real jewel from my association with him. When the record came out, he got a copy of the record we did with Michelle. And he said, hey, man, there was a song called, I think it's called Orange Tinted Sky. And it was very much this sort of thing where Sonny and I were counting. And Tony was kind of playing these odd chords. And it was this very moody piece that had time, but mostly none. It was kind of wherever Sonny and I decided to play. And it sounded like a prepared piece of music, but I don't know how. I mean, to anybody who wasn't there to see how it happened. And Gravatt called me, hey, man. Oh, hi, Eric. How's it going? That track 4 on that record, were you reading a chart? Like, how did you do that? I said, it's hard to explain, but no, there was no music. It was an improvisational piece that we just kind of, I would sort of make a motion. Sonny had been watching my hands for so many years. He knew when I was going to put him down. So if I was already, my body was showing time, he was just in time with me. When I started playing, he started playing. And when you see me pull the sticks back, he stopped playing. So we kept doing this during this whole improvisation. And to listen to it, it's like a quiet sort of insanity going on. But the fact that this dude who used to play with McCoy Tyner was the original drummer in Weather Report is calling me like, how did you do that? That was when I was like, okay, I finally said something,
Well, that's really interesting. And, it also speaks to this thing I wanted to ask you about, which is the relationship with Sonny Thompson. You've been sort of talking about it. And even when you put musicians with endless possibility in a room, which I think can mean a couple things. One is great musicians are capable of making great music, even if they don't know each other. Two strangers can get in a room and find a way to work with each other. But the other thing is when you have people who are hooked up to the same vibration, it's like your body starts moving and he knows a lot of information that could never be expressed verbally. And it seems like that's what you're talking about, is this hookup that you guys have had.
The statement itself comes along with a lot of implications, but I don't care what it sounds like. The bottom line is the most intimate music relationship I have with anybody is with Sonny.
Yeah.
We literally are just in each other's heads. It's a space that only we can go to. He can't really get it with anybody else, and neither can I. So I don't know what that means. You know, I don't know how two people can be more close.
How old were you when you started playing together?
Whoa. I think Sonny came down. Billy Holloman had told Sonny about me. Sonny was up playing at the Riverview doing the organ trio. And I think Sonny was on guitar.
Mm-hmm.
I think at some point Billy Peterson might have been playing upright. I'm not sure, but he was like, man, I was working with the Petersons for something they did at the Artist Corner years ago. And Billy asked, hey, you see Sonny, man? I said, yeah, I see Sonny all the time. He said, man, people don't know, but Sonny can play guitar like for real. Like he's really like on guitar. Like Sonny, man, he can. I mean, he's a bad dude. You know how bad Billy Peterson is. For him to say that, that ain't just saying nothing.
Yeah.
And he's like, man, Sonny, we be playing at these high speeds, and Sonny just he's like, Sonny can bop like fast.
Yeah.
And like hard, man. And I've never heard Sonny do that, but I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? He can do everything else.
Yeah, right. So that's an interesting, and it also talks about the Petersons. I mean, I guess I have to talk to you about the Petersons because that's a shared point of contact and love between us.
Yeah, Ricky, well, Patty, I could keep going. Well, Patty, and it's every one of those people made a way for me at some point in my blossoming into the Minneapolis music scene. Ricky just took a blind chance on me and called me to play on, it was a cover of I Say a Little Prayer for You on Javita Steele's first record. I think she was either on Sony or Warner Brothers, probably. And I'm 17. I had hardly done any sessions before. And I look around and it's like Al Schmitz in the control room with Tommy Tucker Sr., with Ricky, with Tommy LaPuma. And, not too long ago before that, Tutu came out and shook up the world. So I knew who Tommy LaPuma was, man. Also, I was a big fan of George Benson.
Sure.
Like from the late 70s.
Yeah.
I mean, they sold 25 million records together, Tommy LaPuma and George.
Oh, sure.
So I knew who Tommy was, man. And I'm there, just hoping I do the right thing and don't say the wrong thing and get thrown out. And it was it's just a tremendous outpour of support. Yeah. And from there, it just went on with Ricky. He brought Hiram down to the fine line when I was playing with Patty because they were working also at Metro Studios on, I think it was the Give It What You Got record, Hiram Bullock's record. And they come down and we were actually playing one of Hiram's songs. And so they both got up and sat in. And Hiram's like, I like this kid. This kid's all right, man. Yeah, all right. Oh, yeah, that kid can really play. So then Charlie Drayton at some point in time is going to work with Herbie Hancock. They were going to put the Headhunters back together. Hiram's got a gig in Minneapolis coming up at the Fine Line. So then I get asked to do that. After that gig, he asked me to go do a gig at McKell's on 97th and Columbus in New York, and then the Three Rivers Festival in Pittsburgh. So that was my first time on a jet plane, was next to Ricky Peterson. And I'm just like, I don't know what to expect. And I'm next to Ricky. I got the seatbelt on, kind of okay. And then, the plane takes off. Oh, all right. Okay. Don't freak out. I'm telling myself not to freak out. And, probably, 40 minutes in, some turbulence hits. I'm like, what's that? What's that? Ricky's just like, be cool, man.
It's going to be okay.
A plane is not dropping out of the sky. It's just turbulence, brother. Just be cool. It's all right, man. It's all right. And Ricky was really like a surrogate big brother to me. He really watched out for me and did for me. And, one of the other thing he did was put me and Paul together as a rhythm section, and we played on a lot of great records together.
I agree. I love your hookup with Paul. I always loved your hookup with Paul.
He drew so much from everybody else. He's in many ways, he's the superpower in the Peterson family. He learned how to do it. They were all doing it. So he got to be right there and sopping up all that good juice. So he's a colossal musician.
It's so deep. And man, I hope you don't mind me bringing this up, but I know it's something you've been thinking about a lot on some level anyway. The Minneapolis music scene, to me, as an outside observer, always felt like one of the more integrated music scenes that, you had mixed bands working together. And at the same time, I know Minneapolis as a city is not so integrated.
No, isn't that funny? And people would have you think, because the music scene is so integrated, that the city would follow suit. But no, as if you've lived here, if you've lived in the city, you know how divisive things can be. And if you've checked the news in the last couple of years, if you didn't know, you know now.
Well, and I could never make any sense of that, because somehow in the music, even somehow seemed more even. But as soon as you walk off the bandstand, people return back into these like pockets that are not. There's no equity there.
I would put it to you that that's probably the general situation from city to city. You're going to find more harmony in the music community than anywhere. Just like you might find more harmony in the athletic community. Because when you're only really judged by your contribution, it kind of removes your color as a priority.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that, there weren't run-ins and situations that I've heard about. I never, not to my face, experienced anything like this, but I will tell you this. I was the person to tell Paul about the time that Patty had Sonny on a gig, like back in the day. And the manager of the bar or the restaurant, I can't remember what it was called, and it's probably better if I don't call him out now anyway.
Yeah.
But whoever it was had a problem with Sonny, not only with him just being a black person, but the fact that all this funk was coming out, like, what's he doing over there? And Sonny was just messing up the bass. This dude didn't care for it. And the dude basically was like, call somebody else down here to play bass right now, and Patty just, we're leaving. And everybody just rolled their chords up, got their cases out, and they just left. They just left the gig. And, she was embarrassed for white people everywhere, apologizing to Sonny because it ain't right, And Paul had never heard that story. I said, man, you got, because I'm sure just being a white person, period, in this day and age, you got to really check yourself and try to understand, am I friend or foe? Am I an instrument or agent of destruction and I don't know it? Am I in some sort of perfect possession where I think if everything is cool for me, everything must be cool for everybody else? Like, there's a lot of checking going on right now.
Yeah.
He and I had an honest conversation about it.
Yeah.
And he was saying to me, he's like, this sort of thing, I don't know a lot about. And, in my mind, I was like, well, how do you not? I mean, certainly your brothers and sisters could have passed these things on to you as experiences, but, maybe some of those things were too embarrassing for them to tell. And so I told Paul, I'm like, your own sister told the band we're leaving because the manager of I can't remember the name of the place. Was like, get rid of that black bass player or you're done.
The thing about that story that I think is so surprising, and I could see why Paul would be surprised, is because so much of the music that we're talking about that the Petersons have been making and that has come out of Minneapolis is essentially black music. Now we have a whole other side of Minneapolis music that you've also been a part of, which is very kind of rooted in folk rock and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I like to believe I can do it all, or at least well enough so nobody notices.
Well, clearly you can, but I think maybe when it's all working fine in the music, it makes one want to believe that life is actually peachier than it really is, you know?
Well, all right. And not too long ago, and I don't mean to try to spend too much time on this subject. Believe me, I've done it. I've had a show with Dan Spiffy Newman called Music Politics, where we have discussed these subjects ad nauseum. But I will say that there was some controversy. I can't remember the name of the dude, but who was trying to give Patty Peterson the blues over, it had something to do with music and, cultural appropriation and all of this and that. And it's like, you know what? I am only offended by people who don't play music well. I don't care what color you are. That doesn't matter to me. Music is the only place where it's not supposed to matter. And so at my first opportunity to speak on it, I was like, none of you have the onus to insinuate, that these people don't have a right to express themselves and play this music the way they, and not only that, their people have been in the music business for so long. It's not like they're just saying whatever. They know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
So it's one thing to try to Me Too people, and it's another thing to just, the thing is that you have to know enough about where a person's been or where they're coming from to judge the importance of what it is they speak.
Yes.
And I'm like the surrogate other son of the family.
Yeah.
I loved Jeannie Arlen Peterson. Every time she played, it was like getting a harmony lesson.
Yeah.
And one of the most incredible moments for me seeing her was the day she dropped by the studio when we were recording with George Benson. She and George Benson started talking about people nobody in the room ever even heard of. They go that far back.
Oh, sure.
Her and George were just talking about people, the people who probably should have made it but didn't. It's like everybody is borrowing from somebody, whether they also be black or also be white. It's the way of the world. And I'm no kind of kumbaya, let's all come together type of dude. But for all intents and purposes, the cat is out of the bag. And I can understand why a lot of young people decide to take up that mantle and say, that ain't yours, this ain't yours, that ain't yours, and so on. My people built this country. All that might be true. But black culture is American culture. They're indelibly one and the same. As much as black people have contributed, you think we'd be treated better. That's the real problem, is that, a couple of things. Great art comes from pain. And that's why certain people got to borrow it, because they didn't go through enough.
Dig it. Yes.
And I'll just say this as a side note. They started jumping all over Bruno Mars about this when it started popping. Bruno's just borrowing music from black people. And I'm like, yeah, that's all true and everything. That doesn't mean he's not an ally. He's definitely not an accomplice, but he might be an ally. And I waited the entire, year after the George Floyd murder and everything and the Black Lives Matter movement, and not a peep from Bruno. And maybe his management was like, hey, maybe you shouldn't polarize yourself. Don't play yourself, man. Just lay in the cut, come out with that Anderson .Paak, come out with the Silk Shockers or whatever they're called, and just keep it moving. But I don't feel the same about Bruno no more. I mean, I feel like if you like black people enough to borrow from them, you ought to like them enough to stand up for them. And that's all I'm saying. And I know at least one Peterson stood up for a black person.
Well, I know that in the last year you started this show with Dan Spiffy Newman, and you started talking about this stuff. And it seems like a kind of a new part of your public persona to really get involved in these conversations in public. You live in Minneapolis. George Floyd must have changed everything, or at least brought the narrative, the conversation to a national level. But what was it that finally broke the camel's back and you said, I need to talk about this stuff?
Well, I mean, right before George Floyd, I think I watched the video of Ahmaud Arbery being chased down in the street by a couple of hicks with shotguns. I was like, what am I watching? Am I watching like a historically accurate black film from the 70s? What is happening? I'm in this time warp where this young man is just jogging. He's on the track team. He's just and a couple of hicks decide I see a black guy running. He must have done something wrong. and they fabricate the story, and they go, and, and shoot this kid in the street. It had been a long time since I witnessed an actual murder. And it ran through me, man. I was just like, I can't ever see something like that again. It's like, and I know a lot of Black people on Facebook who avoid watching. They don't want to normalize this type of activity. Just watching Black people get killed. It's open season on us. So that's a lot of murders to have to watch and ingest. And like, that was already a pastime for white folks many a decade ago. Lynch Black people at the county fair. Don't miss the lynching. And you can see like there's postcards of pictures of this type of thing. So I'm only laughing because the whole notion is absurd to me. But it's tragic, Leo. And, so I grew up in a very conscious household, understanding the differential between what you're told is a Black man's place in the world and what you decide to shoot for on your own, with your own ambition and your own imagination. Like, I'm well acquainted with how to process all that. But until I saw the George Floyd tape, something else happened in me. I don't know what about that, jarred me into having to say something about it. Also, part of it may have been some dialogues I had with friends of mine who want to speak openly about social issues and the significance of race in the United States. And some people, had convinced themselves, well, no, it's not as bad as that. There's been real progress. You can't say there's been no progress. What about the Fair Housing Act? What about, the right to vote? And I'm like, yeah, okay, that's fair. But these little things that have, not little, but these significant changes have always been the work of just a few people, and not only that, if you check the history of this country, the broader part of white America is resistant to change. It's always something you're having to force people into, and then they complain about it after. What is affirmative action? Don't ask, how come you have to follow it? Ask, why does something like this have to be put in place in the first place? People ask the wrong questions. Yeah. So to try to shorten my response, because I could do another hour, and I don't want to, and you don't want to. But just something in me kind of snapped, and I'm like, I need to effectively educate anybody who wants to listen on what things are really like in this country. And Dan Spiffy Newman knows a lot of people who are activists and agents of social change, and that meant that he could get to other people who are also involved in the system. So we started showcasing people, Black people who were involved in the legal system, Black people who were just, activists. Some were scientists. Some study environmental racism. And I didn't even really know what that was before they told me. And then they started talking about, when large corporations dump their waste into neighborhoods that don't have the power to fight back, that's environmental racism. They dump it right in the most colorful part of town. Like Flint, Michigan. That's environmental racism. Just get the pipes fixed, man. How many young children have to get lead poisoning? How many birth defects? How many casualties do you need to chalk up? That's environmental racism. It's when the people who live in the Black and brown part of town get treated like they don't matter. Like, just dump, we're waste, so just dump your waste here. That's what they're trying to say when they do stuff like that. Yeah. And I guess I had never put the two together, like environmental racism. Long story short, doing that podcast took a lot out of me, man, because when you're talking about several situations that are where there's no solution in sight, you can't help but begin to feel hopeless or like there's nothing you can do, like your hands are tied, because any kind of justice comes slow. I'm surprised that Derek Chauvin got convicted. We still don't know what the sentence is going to be like, but just history has shown us how difficult it is to convict a cop, even to get him to come to court.
The response to the conviction, I had such complicated feelings about it because I felt that it was the right result. But the amount of joy that was felt by people that I saw being interviewed saying, oh, change is possible. It's finally possible that there could be some justice served. And I'm looking at this going, this is such a small victory. This cat was caught on tape. There's absolutely zero doubt about his culpability, about his guilt. And we're going to celebrate that justice was served in a situation when there is zero doubt about it. That does not speak that highly of the progress that's being made. But it was a change. It was the first time, as you say, it's so hard to convict a cop or even for a cop to show up, that was a major victory.
Yeah, that was considered a major victory.
Right.
But you know what it felt like to me was when Obama got elected. Like certain people were like, all right, finally, these Negroes can stop complaining. Mm-hmm. There's a black president now. Everything great. You got what you wanted. Stop complaining. But black people knew, well, being the first black person to do anything in this country that's a daunting task. If you survive, to actually do it.
Yes.
And,
no kidding.
But it's that thing where people just, it's sometimes even a little relief can bring total euphoria. Yeah. And that's dangerous because then people start going, okay, we can relax now. It's like, no, you can't. First off, there's 3 other dudes. Yeah. Who need to be held accountable for it. Not only that, it's like, and you start down the spiral, and you're back where you started. Breonna Taylor's killers.
Do you think that if you had been, this was a funny year too, because we were all locked inside. We were all, COVID brought us all inward, both physically and mentally, right? Like we've just been kind of in our own heads so much this year. Do you think that was part of what got you thinking on these terms also? Like, you can't really go anywhere. You're just kind of home thinking about this stuff and watching it. Was it easier for you to speak out like this now because we're home and this is what we're thinking about? You know what I'm saying? If it had been a regular year, do you think you would have taken that on?
It's hard to know because the catharsis forced me to think, more deeply about a lot of things. And I have not considered myself an influencer or, I had to be told that's what I was. And then, what do you mean by that? People listen to you when you start saying stuff. Mm-hmm. So I'm an influencer now. That's what I'm called. And I that's still questionable. I'm not trying to be anybody's example.
But you know what's funny about that though? Just knowing that as musicians, we know that you have been an influencer for a long time on a different level. I saw you on your live stream the other day with 10 other drummers and you influenced at least half of them. I mean, you've been an influencer in your own way, but this is different. This is a different version of that, I guess.
Yes. To further the point, I learned more about myself during these isolated months than I probably was able to in my entire life. It was very much an inner journey, and I figured out, I reprioritized my life. I did a lot of things. I became a vegan in August, not like, let's do it, but it was like my stepdaughter, Nico, had been trying, but it's kind of hard to be a vegan in this house when we're bringing Popeye's chicken in here and Famous Dave's is making a regular appearance. It's like no mortal person can resist Popeye's chicken. You can say it if you want. I mean, and more so, no mortal, vegan, vegetarian, or otherwise can resist bacon. So I don't care what they say. There's a lot of vegans out there eating bacon.
Wait, so are you one of them? Is that what's happening with you? You're vegan, but a little bacon shows up?
I would say that when we go off the program, we go together. And I've slowly integrated certain things back into my situation, but in the back of my mind, that voice has already conditioned me to look for alternatives. Yeah, and it has more to do with living better, or at least well. I'm 52. Yeah, so at least half is over.
Yeah.
I don't mean to take a morbid turn, especially, in light of, recently I had to say goodbye to a very close friend, Billy Franzi. If death tried to mess with Billy would just whoop it, and send it packing. And he just kind of, not spontaneously, but to us, it's like he just rolled out one day. God just tapped him on the shoulder. Billy. And Billy said, huh?
When you were talking about Eric Gravatt and a couple of other names that have come up today, it really made me think about Billy Franzi, only because these are names that, if you know anything about the Minneapolis scene, these are names that are known. But Billy Franzi is somebody who really is not known in the way that some other musicians who came out of Minneapolis, yourself included, are. And yet he may be one of the most influential cats that you never heard or heard of. So maybe you could just tell me and whoever is listening by proxy a little bit about Billy Franze.
Whoa. Apparently, Billy was born in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I'm not sure when he moved to Minneapolis, but I met him in 1980. I met him probably in 1986 when I was down hanging around Doug Maynard and them on Sundays at the Whiskey Junction. He was dressed very conservatively. He had like a poplin hat on and like one of those sports coats with like the patches on the elbows. And he was drinking Heineken, and he was sitting at the bar, and he was looking kind of belligerent. But I had seen that he set up his equipment earlier, but he didn't seem very approachable. But I don't know. I was dumb as a kid. I just kind of walked into danger. And I started talking to Billy, and he wasn't too interested in talking. That's cool. And then he got on stage, and it was like, this one man hurricane just started. I mean, he was so like full on and animated and just kind of he had pent up his musical his musical energy and endeavors for a while. I guess this was like basically he had it. I don't know if he had been working as a real estate agent or something, some straight job, but Billy had it. And he was going back into doing what makes him happy. Maybe he was doing it to please someone else. Maybe, one of his ex-wives, I don't know. But he was like, I'm not taking it anymore. That's how he played guitar. Like, I'm not taking anything off anybody. and it wasn't until after I sat in that night and kind of hung around at the end of the night that we started talking, and he kind of took a shine to me. He saw that I could play a little bit. And the more I hung around, the more I got to know those guys. And from the whiskey, I started going down to bunkers, back when it was just, 4 or 5 bikers and, a couple of people playing pool and that was about it. And the bartenders and the bikers were already like, if you guys don't play some Steppenwolf sometime soon, man, I'm leaving, and they were down there playing all that, all that soul music. Yeah. Down there, getting funky. Yeah. And the bikers didn't want to hear none of that. The band started to catch on, and some of the early support for the combo was other musicians who had Monday night off, because most bars were closed, most clubs were closed downtown on Monday night, and the only other industry that's closed usually on Monday is like hair salons, and so we had a lot of musicians coming to sit in who were a part of the audience, and then we had a lot of hairdressers, and that was how the combo, that's kind of how we started gaining traction, and then around when the Riverview closed, black folks didn't really know where else they could go to hear some good music. And so they had found their way down to bunkers, and by the time Prince came along, it started coming around. Then it was just the cat was out of the bag, and it was a full blown thing. We were packed every Monday night, and that's how it stayed for a lot of years. Yeah. Yeah. Through it all, I think Billy was the constant, because, Sonny and I would be out on tour with Prince, or out of the country, recording with people, or doing to LA. Like, a lot of people had other stuff going on, and Billy sometimes too. Billy was the musical director for an artist named Pebbles. Oh, sure. Billy was her MD, and she toured with Luther Vandross, I think, in the States and in Japan. And so Billy was gone for a real long stretch of time for at some point, I think either in 1990 or 91, and then later on when God's the man God blessed us all with, Doug Nelson, passed away in like 2000. Billy went on tour with Johnny Lang to play in Doug's place, and he kind of was the only guy who could, because Billy and Doug grew up sort of knowing each other, and they played bass kind of similar. Doug played more like tight, like Jocko. Like his pizzicato was very, very, like articulate. Yeah. Whereas Billy played more like Willie Weeks. Yeah. And either way, they were both mind blowing bass players. Yeah. I don't know if Doug ever played guitar, but Billy if either a guitar player, if anytime we had a bass player that was out, like if Sonny was out and we were still there, I was there and Billy was there. Sometimes Billy would play bass and we'd hire somebody else on to play guitar. It's just Billy could do both easily.
Yep.
And I think it's funny because sometimes Billy would bend a little sharp, and I used to wonder why that was, but that's because he was a bass player. He had, the thicker the string, so Billy would get excitable and he'd
go a little too far.
Yeah, sometimes he was usually in there, but it's like sometimes, and anybody else wouldn't even notice, but I have perfect pitch, so I'm hearing everything in those terms. What is there to say about him? He was loved, and Billy, loved everybody. He was a sincere person. He never held a grudge against anybody. And if he did, you'd never know it. He mentored many guitar players in the city. Cory Wong will tell you himself that he got taken, to real school when he started coming down to Bunkers and watching Billy and figuring out where things are really at. We're all students, but, your level of awareness has most to do with what you take away. And Cory paid a lot of attention, just like Batar paid a lot of attention to me.
Well, I'm glad that you brought us there, because what I think is interesting talking to you now, look, you are not by any stretch of the imagination an old man. You say 52 years old, I want to eat a little better and, make sure that I can stick around as long as I can.
Well, if I'm going to be here, man, it's,
Of course, but you're not new either. You're certainly not new. And, we started this conversation with you as a 16-year-old kind of being brought into that scene. And now you're the elder statesman. And it's really interesting because a lot of the music that you're attached to, and certainly that scene, it's got this new life. There's all these kids, these students of funk, and all these new bands that are popping up that are obsessing over a lot of the music that was just kind of native to your life. I mean, I'm sure you've been seeing that there's all these kids now that are playing funk music and R&B.
Yeah. I'll say this. God bless Cory Wong, because Cory could see around the corner a little bit, hanging out with those Vulfpeck cats, hanging out with Joe and Jack and
Theo Cat.
Theo, yes. Yeah. Who's actually, man, Theo's a bad dude. Theo's a bad cat. God bless those dudes and Jack Stratton, who I think maybe it was he and Cory talking about, like, I think Jack inquired, like, do you think we could do something with Michael Bland? And Cory said, well, I'll talk to him. I mean, and, I didn't completely understand the concept at first. I'm not one to follow trends or to, like, I'm almost a Luddite when it comes to technology. If I didn't get a gig every once in a while through Facebook, I'd shut it down probably. So I said, yeah, all right, I didn't really think that much of it. They paid nice, and eventually they dropped the video, and I was like, oh, cool, it's out. Every once in a while I go back and look, and it's like, oh, wow, this thing's gaining quite a bit of traction.
Thousands and thousands and thousands.
And then it was hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
I was like, what's going on? And then, like, clips of people doing a tribute to the, like other people watching it and playing what I was playing. And making transcriptions, and like Vulfpeck single-handedly, pushed me into, relevance in this, this new age in which we live.
Yeah.
And I have endless thanks to Jack Stratton and company for doing that, because I'm telling you, I'm one of the prickliest of the prickly, and that's just kind of how I roll, Leo. It's just a way of keeping everybody honest,
sure.
I guess.
Knowing that you are the prickliest of the prickly, I want to thank you for treating me kindly and gently today, because it's such a pleasure to hear these stories.
I open with the oldest possible thing I could say to anybody. Boy, you look just like your dad.
Oh, man.
Thank you so much, man.
Thanks, Michael.
All right, we'll see you.
There he was, my friends, Michael Bland. I'll be back again in your headspace before you know it. Until then, I'll talk to you soon.